So, to give you a little background on Paul, he graduated from the University of Utah, and he has a law degree from Santa Clara University. Following that, he went to, is it true that you went to Silicon Valley for your next, so you were corporate counsel and vice president of legal affairs?
Yep.
So he went straight to the deep end of the pool and did corporate counsel and other things in Silicon Valley. He then returned to Utah and took a position at the Cedar Band Corporation. The Cedar Band Corporation is owned by the Cedar Band of the Paiute tribe. And so his first position there was as chief legal officer. He then became the CEO of one of their subsidiaries. He is currently the chief executive officer of Cedar Band Corporation, and just the coolest guy. We're so glad to have him with us. Please welcome Paul Terry.
Can I be here, or am I wandering?
You can do both. You can
Okay. Thanks, Tyler. Do I leave the mask on, or can I take it off?
No one's going to tackle you if you take it off.
Okay. You up front, do you mind if I take it off? I've had my first shot. I'm going tomorrow for my second shot. So I think I'm halfway there. I thought maybe I was in the wrong room. After Craig said this is for successful entrepreneurs, I thought I'm in the wrong room then. You're quite the bunch to behold this afternoon. And I do enough speaking in church that I probably shouldn't be nervous, but I really am in front of you. So please bear with me. So I've got some prepared remarks. I'm not that smart to not be able to write down my thoughts and just speak from the hip. But I really want this to be as interactive as it possibly can be. So I'm not opposed to your interjecting as I speak. I'm not that way. So if something comes to mind like me, my staff knows I have to probably say it as quickly as I think it. If not, then it's going to be a fleeting thought, and then it's gone probably forever. All right. So formally, let me just start this off and give some thanks. Tyler Stillman, the Entrepreneurship Leadership Council, and SUU's Larry H. and Gail Miller Center for Entrepreneurship, thank you for inviting me to participate in this wonderful event. I hope it'll be wonderful. I am both honored and humbled to have been invited to participate, and hope that what I have tried to thoughtfully prepare is somewhat beneficial, if not insightful, to all who are here today. See, I already blew it, huh? All right, let's try this again. And just on a personal note, I hope everyone had a wonderful Easter weekend. And I think this is your spring semester, right? So I hope you are enjoying it so far. And much as you, I look forward to returning to a new normal as we eventually extinguish this COVID-19 wildfire. And I think we're getting close. I think it's under containment. So please forgive me as I speak briefly about this COVID-19 pandemic, which has impacted most, if not all, of our lives in one way or another. Namely, because the pandemic has been the cause of hundreds of millions of global citizens becoming ill, and unfortunately, many of those who have become ill have also succumbed to the virus, and even today continue to pass away. Because COVID-19 was the impetus for the risk of a looming financial collapse and has weakened the global economy, and which associated downturn seems to be one of the worst economic shocks since the Great Depression of the 1930s. No one here was alive in the 30s, right? Craig, you weren't either, were you? Okay. And because it has brought about unprecedented U.S. and global unemployment rates. We all need to be preparing for a different future. Even though this pandemically induced economic crisis will continue to cause hardship for people, it has created and will continue to create opportunities for innovation across many industries, including technology, and particularly next-gen disruptive technology. FinTech, or financial technology innovation, DeFi, decentralized finance, also genomic revolution, autonomous technology, robotics and AI, artificial intelligence technology, and lastly, space exploration. Who wouldn't want to be on a different planet as we experience the next pandemic? In the inimitable words of this political philosopher and scientist like Machiavelli, to parliamentarians and politicians and diplomats and statesmen like Sir Winston Churchill, conventional wisdom tells us we should, quote, never let a good crisis go to waste, close quote, which I say slightly tongue-in-cheek, since this pandemic is no trivial matter and has truly been a devastating health and economic crisis. However, this health and economic crisis has presented an incredible opportunity for digital disruptors, including the most significant crisis breakthrough being the application of blockchain's fundamental technology to sovereign fiat currencies. To leverage technology and provide suitable financial solutions in order to bridge the gap between the haves and the have-nots, the underbanked and the unbanked, and our global brothers and sisters in the less developed corners of this world. Because of this global pandemic, there will be greater consolidation of both high-tech and low-tech operators, integrators, and facilitators. Conversely, well-prepared startups will be accelerated as a result and will become the essential go-to place for both the private and public sector, including and especially world governments. The crisis became an accelerator for growth, investment promotion, and a better culture for risk management and financial inclusion. Quoting from a 2020 article in Entrepreneur, quote, "The crisis will continue to cause hardship for people, but it will also create opportunities for innovation across many industries, particularly technology and finance. This is the time for us all to take more risks, focus on what really matters, and embrace the opportunity to lead and push forward a common goal. Where in the creed of NASA Mission Control Center, quote unquote, failure is not an option." As a side note, one of our 11 Cedar Band Corporation companies is a defense contractor, and we have a satellite office in Huntsville, Alabama, or more affectionately known as Rocket City, USA, as it is the home to the U.S. Army Aviation and Missile Command at Redstone Arsenal and to NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center. And we've chased too many opportunities there. I've spent too much time in our offices in Huntsville, and I quite frankly like Huntsville at this point. Let's use the pressure and opportunity created by the COVID-19 to press for change to create a solid culture of innovation and prevention in both the private and public sectors. I recently heard from a renowned former university president about two basic principles, which can guide and buoy us as we face proving and trying circumstances in our lives, whatever they may be. First, the principle of preparation. And secondly, the principle of leaning in. During a global pandemic or during your pre-pandemic everyday life, please come with eyes wide open, minds wide open, and hearts wide open in order to find and fill the gap. On a personal anecdotal basis, my first eyes, heart, and mind wide open venture, and I put in bold red print after that parenthetically, failure. But that's for me to know and to remember. I think you can tell once I share this that it was a monumental failure. On January 17th, 1991, I don't think any of you were alive in 1991, were you? Were you? Oh, okay, some of you were. Operation Desert Shield, which consisted of more than 500,000 American troops deployed to Saudi Arabia in case Iraqi troops attacked Saudi Arabia, became Operation Desert Storm, backed by public support after diplomacy failed. That same month and year, my wife Jennifer, is she here by the way? Okay. My wife Jennifer and I were a 1-year-old married couple in our honeymoon stage, and I was a sophomore at the University of Utah. During that same year's spring break, we launched our first wide open venture in the desert of Palm Springs, financially backed by my father-in-law, right? We were just poor college students, who was the vice president of marketing and advertising at American Savings and Loan in California, which for the older people in the room will remember that, which again, for you business school students, the 1986 through 95 Savings and Loan, or S&L, crisis may be, and if it is not, should be, a business school case study in how Federal Reserve policymaking, including overregulation, we like to call it overreach in the law, followed by unwieldy deregulation, was the impetus for the S&L crisis. It was a debacle, to say the very least. There were probably 3,200 savings and loan institutions nationwide, and a quarter of them closed. So you can imagine the runs on the bank during that time. Because my father-in-law was our financial backer and shirt designer, he trumped my decision for what the wording should be and unilaterally changed the textual content. Namely, my wording of quote-unquote storm in the desert, and altered play on words of desert storm, since thousands of spring breakers cause a literal storm in the desert as they ascend upon the Palm Springs desert for a few consecutive weeks of spring break each year. Vis-a-vis my father-in-law's preferred wording of quote-unquote desert storm, which was the actual unadulterated language from the Department of Defense. And such military action, engagement, and war was still very controversial in the minds of many college and university students, and I assume others. And thus, presumably, they did not want to wear the quote-unquote desert storm shirts, but may have wanted to purchase and wear quote-unquote storm in the desert shirts to commemorate their 1991 spring break in Palm Springs. You can only imagine what happened. Subsequently, we ended up with very few sales and instead had a fire sale of our products at a Southern California flea market. We just found the closest flea market to dump boxes and boxes and boxes of Desert Storm shirts. I hope we saved at least one, just for posterity's sake. Remember that you live and die by your business decisions, not literally die, and not by the business decisions of an investor or one who is not as vested in your business idea as you are. So, after that monumental failure, but spectacular learning experience, we returned to school for my junior year, focused on academics for the remainder of my student career at the U, but with an even greater appetite and full-throated desire to start up my next venture, to remember lessons learned, and then to use and build upon such lessons to stand up my next venture. Be it successful or otherwise. Failure has paved my pathway to success, and I'm careful to even say my pathway. My pathway was chocked full of individuals who were part of my pathway, including and especially my sweet bride of 31 years, mentors and teachers, colleagues, great supervisors and managers and executives at the different companies that I worked for. So I'm careful when I say my pathway. In 2000, 21 years ago this year, and nearly a decade after my first unsuccessful venture in 1991, I was commuting up and down I-880. Craig knows that quite well. He's also from the San Jose area. From our home in San Jose to my office in Fremont, California, where I worked as corporate counsel for a semiconductor capital equipment technology company. It's commonly accepted that in the Socratic dialogue Republic, Plato famously wrote, quotes, "Our need will be the real creator," close quote, which was molded over time into the English proverb, quote, "Necessity is the mother of invention," close quote. Although sometimes frustration with Bay Area traffic is equally the mother of invention. Since what should have been a normal 30-minute commute many times turned into a 60 to 90-minute commute depending upon traffic accidents and weather. As I sat in the I-880 6 to 8 lane parking lot on many of my AM or PM rush hour commutes, I read many static billboards which lined northbound and southbound I-880. Advertising anything and everything. I then looked at the vehicles parked on all sides of me on 880 and thought, why can't these vehicles have the same advertisements on them as the static billboards have? And yet the vehicles would be dynamic, mobile billboards. And instead of being static billboards on the side of the freeway, these mobile billboards could go anywhere and could create dynamic guerrilla marketing and advertising campaigns. And thus, drivebyadvertise.com was born in my home office in 2000. And then I just put a little parenthetical to remind myself I would work my full-time position as corporate counsel to the tech company on average from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., and then return home and would work on building my own company from 7 p.m. until whenever, until I couldn't keep my eyes open any longer, usually around 1 a.m., and then would get up and do that same routine all over again, day in and day out. And for those of you who have started your own companies, you get that. DriveByAdvertise.com was the first full-service guerrilla marketing car wrap company in California, if not in the nation. At least I like to say that because I don't know of any other ones that were around in 2000. There was Auto Wraps up in San Francisco, but it was a slightly different business model, and I hadn't heard about them until they heard about me and came knocking. The Disney Consumer Products division of the Walt Disney Company became my first client, as well as a repeat client at the Magic Las Vegas Fashion Buyers and Brand Show in February 2001 and again in August 2001. And I just did a quick search last night. That Magic show is still going on. So it's one of the largest shows where consumer products companies will bring their wares, their clothing wares, and display them to the world's buyers for Macy's and Kohl's and Saks Fifth Avenue, whatever it might be, whatever companies out there, they go to the Magic Show in Las Vegas because they're in one concentrated location. And it's going on again in August of this year. So those are their 2 times every year in Vegas, February and August. We also had a California amusement park who was our client, as we were providing vinyl wrapped vehicles and mobile guerrilla marketing up and down and across the Golden State and from the Bay Area to Las Vegas. Just make sure that you marry well. And I can honestly and sincerely say I married way up when I married my sweet wife. She was one of my drivers in our vehicle. So we would tell our clients, whatever vehicle you want, we have. Now maybe that was stretching the truth a little bit, because I would go out to the Enterprises and the Avises of the world and rent whatever vehicle my clients would come to me asking for us to wrap. And since Disney was our first client, that was literally baptism by fire. They sent us a packet about this thick describing how our drivers need it to look, because it's Disney. They have a look that they have to uphold. So our drivers, and again, this says nothing about anyone with these things, but this was back in 2000. They couldn't have multiple piercings in the ear. They couldn't have tattoos. They couldn't have anything of that nature. So they had to be Disney-looking individuals. I suspect that has changed over time because our society has changed. But back then, I had to find drivers, female drivers, who would look like the Disney princesses that they were wrapping our 4 vehicles in regards to, because they were introducing a new Disney line of young princess clothing at the Magic Show in Las Vegas. And they hired models from New York, and they sat in the passenger side of our vehicles while my drivers drove the vehicles between the convention center to the different hotels where the Disney executives were staying. And they came down and they took a look at the vehicles, and I think they liked it well enough that they invited us back that next Magic Show in August. These 2 ventures, one a wonderful failure and one a wonderful success, as well as an 11-year career in corporate legal departments in varying industries, from technology to healthcare, insurance to banking to defense contracting, grew me into my current 12-year role at Cedar Band Corporation. What did I learn throughout all of these refining moments in my personal and professional life and career? One invaluable lesson I learned was that I wished I would have heeded the lessons in both the title and content of Robert Fulghum's 30-plus-year-old classic, international, and phenomenal #1 New York Times bestseller, All I Really Need to Know, I Learned in Kindergarten. Because apparently it took me not only kindergarten, but kindergarten plus an additional 19 years of primary and secondary schools, post-secondary undergraduate school and law school before I finally mastered, and that's probably a misstatement. I'm still learning what I probably should have learned in kindergarten. May I exercise a bit of literary license and change one word in the following statements. In the perfectly placed and inspiring words of Robert Fulghum, quote, "Wisdom was not at the top of the graduate school mountain, but there in the sandpile in kindergarten," close quote. Another renowned and former university president once said, quote, "If you are treading water in the current of a river, you will go somewhere. You simply will go wherever the current takes you. Going with the stream, following the tide, drifting in the current will not do." Choices have to be made. Not making a choice is a choice. Let's you and I choose now to start up, stand up, and grow up companies that will make this world even a little better tomorrow than it is today. I promise that as you, I, and we prepare and prove ourselves willing and able to lean into our academic and professional lives, and most importantly, our personal lives, by doing all things possible, and even some things impossible, we all can leave a legacy of humanitarian and social entrepreneurship. And may you and I be the thought leaders who employ all of our academic credentials and experiential training to whiteboard, to blueprint, and to design and build our companies, while we lead our companies and team members with not only our minds, but just as importantly, with our hearts, as we create legacy companies which will outlast our lifetimes and bless descendant generations, which generations will follow in our footsteps and will stand on our shoulders. Thank you. So Tyler, I'm open for Q&A, or
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
So we typically go till about 20 after. I can't quite see the clock there, but
There's 12 minutes.
so yeah, any questions for Paul?
Yeah.
So, when you transitioned from your desert storm in the desert, what was the biggest motivator for you to get back up and start anything after you had just gone through all of that?
I'm not sure if there was one motivator in particular. I don't know if it was inherent within me, and I think some people are that way. Some people just have that inherent drive. I've seen many of you, perhaps, at multiple pitches right here in this room, and you've been pitching the same story and the same idea, which is wonderful. Don't stop. So just keep going, and if it's not inherent within you, go develop it. And I think that's all that it takes. Thank you.
Paul, can you talk a little bit about your decision to join with Cedar Band Corporation and just your thinking and decision making, and maybe talk a little bit about what Cedar Band is?
Okay, very good, thank you. This could be another hour answer, Tyler. So I will try to abbreviate it. I was working as the vice president of legal affairs for a healthcare insurance company outside of Sacramento. And we were tasked, three of us, the vice president of human resources, the executive vice president of corporate development, who was a former investment banker in the North Bay of the Bay Area, and myself, to come in and help this relatively startup company that was 10 years old. So by definition, it was not a startup, but it still acted like a startup, to prepare to either go public or to attract outside investor dollars. So we put all the policies and the procedures and the protocols in place. We wrote them for each department for the entire company. After about 2 years, I think we were prepared to go out with a PPM, which is a private placement memorandum, to the street to attract either those investment dollars or to go public. So we wanted first to see if we could attract those investment dollars, and we did. A firm down in Houston that had just sold itself to AIG for about $400 million was just looking for another healthcare insurance type of company that they could invest in. And they found us, and we found them, and it all worked out. So they came in with about $10 million, 5 in debt and 5 in equity. And when you invest in a company, that amount, you take over the company. So they took over the board of directors. There were 3 partners. One was chairman, and his 2 partners were on the board as well. So about 6 months later, they started cleaning house of all of us. So we effectively worked ourselves out of a job, which is fine, right? That's business. And sometimes business is brutal. Unfortunately, there's real lives attached to those business decisions. That's why I mentioned what I did at the close of my remarks. So that was the first time in my career since graduating from law school that I was without a job. And I came home early that day from work. Oh, there's my sweet wife. I came home early from work that day, and as I mentioned, I was usually at work from 7 to 7, thereabouts, and I came home about lunchtime. And my wife was at home, and she came down, and she hopped in the car. I said, let's go to lunch. And she goes, "What are you doing home? Did you get fired?" Right? Like she said, she'll never live down those words ever in her life, right? Technically, I wasn't fired. I was asked to resign, so I resigned. And they were so kind to me. The founder was the one who called me into his office, and he couldn't even get it out. So the president of the company was in there with us as well, so he let me know. And they were so kind and so generous. But they didn't have control over the company anymore. So, and I get that. Our new investors brought in their cronies from Houston who they knew, and they knew could build companies to 400 million. And so they let us, who were the unknown commodities, go. So there was a group of us that were all let go. So we just, we struggled for a while. And it was a challenge. We had a big mortgage and 4 kids. And we really learned about ourselves during that time. And then my wife spent a couple months at her mom's bedside in Salt Lake City as she was dying of cancer, and just had this very strong impression that we needed to start looking in Utah. We didn't have any other reason to stay in California, and so we did. And an opportunity came up with Cedar Band Corporation, which is the parent company to the Zions banks on the corners, and they own 8 other banks in the Mountain West and the West, one in California. And so we took that position. And I was starting at kind of that proverbial bottom rung of that ladder, and I was glad. We were pleased. We were elated to have a job, but I kept looking. I felt like maybe I had more to offer than down there, and Cedar Band Corporation is huge. It's a huge corporation. So I would have a lot of rungs and a lot of the jungle gym to climb. The COO of Facebook, Sandberg, once said that it's not a corporate ladder, it's a corporate jungle gym, and I really like that comparison because it's not straight up. Sometimes we go sideways. Sometimes we're hanging on by our fingertips on the monkey bars just to stay alive. And, you'll experience that. In some way, shape, or form, you'll experience that. And that's the beauty of life. And that's why we're here, to experience the good, the bad, and sometimes the very ugly. So I kept looking, and this opportunity came up in Cedar City. We didn't know what Cedar City was. When we were students at the U, we thought Southern Utah was Provo. So we didn't know there was very much, and I'm serious about that. We didn't know. I mean, we knew St. George. We had come down once for spring break when we were students. But when you're a student, you don't pay attention because you only have so much money to get to where you're going, and then to get back safely. So this opportunity came up, and it sounded interesting, diametrically opposite from what I was doing in technology or even in banking. So it was quite the change for us. And working with the federal government, so half of our companies, I'll just segue really quickly into Cedar Band Corporation. So we, again, 11 companies, and that changes, right? Because we're already working on the next company. So we want to make Exit 51 a destination spot. So right now we have our travel plaza that we just built last June. That's full service, Seclair branded. We have 4 Tesla supercharging stations. They're only the V2 technology, and Tesla right now has V3 technology, which is about a 20 to 24 minute supercharge, which is about the same amount of time you spend filling up your car. You run in, use the restroom, buy your Scooby snacks, come out. It's about that time, 15, 20 minutes. So our issue is that Rocky Mountain Power doesn't have enough juice to supply us with what will be 16 V3 supercharging stations out there. So we'll have the highest concentration of Tesla supercharging stations between the Las Vegas Tesla dealership and the Salt Lake City Tesla dealership. So we will be the destination for Tesla drivers. And I've got a couple friends in Parowan who have Teslas, and they say coming up that Black Ridge Mountain is the worst thing for a Tesla battery. They're almost done by the time they reach the top of the Black Ridge. So it's kind of a treat for them to have us right there, almost at the top of the Black Ridge. But we're already planning for our hotel. We're planning for fast food restaurants, full service restaurants out there that we want to make as a destination spot for you, for all of Cedar, for the transient travelers on I-15. So, but right now our 11, about half our defense contracting. So we have contracts with the federal government, primarily the DoD, at Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. We've had Coast Guard contracts as well. From Fort Lee in Virginia, we had them at Fort Belvoir outside of the Beltway, all the way to Hill Air Force Base. We just won a large $98 million construction contract at Nellis, Creech, and the Nutter, which is the Nevada Test and Training Range out there in the desert. So, that's the group of companies we currently have. We've got a mortgage agency that we do first and second mortgages. If you're interested in purchasing a home, because we're a sovereign entity, we can act like a housing finance agency. So all 50 states have one housing finance agency. The state of Utah has one. Well, now they have competition. They have us. And states don't like competition, right? Because they're not made to compete. They're just political and bureaucratic behemoths, but we're not. We're nimble. We can turn on a dime. We can do things that they can't do. So we've done very well in our mortgage agency. We've probably placed about 20,000 to 25,000 homeowners already into homes. We do about 150 million a month in our mortgage agency. That's not revenue. That's homes that we are putting our home buyers into. So, we've got a beverage company that's national. I think we're the first Native American wine company. We're in 19 states. We're in the District of Columbia. We're the exclusive Native American wine to the Smithsonian, to their National Museum of the American Indian, and the Mitztam Cafe. We've got a travel plaza. We've got a distribution company. So that's who we are. And it was interesting. I thought this opportunity would be interesting. Sometimes it's like turning the Titanic, dealing with the federal government. It's slow. It's not technology in the Silicon Valley. So that was one thing that I had to get used to. I expected things to happen almost overnight because things change so quickly within that valley that you get contracts in place relatively quickly. And that's not the case with the federal government. They have no impetus to work faster or work smarter, and I'm careful to say that. That's really generalizing it, but that's been our general experience. So it's been a great learning experience for me as well, but it's been a wonderful ride. And as my executive team knows, we are here to build legacy companies. It's not about us, it's about our shareholder. And we've got one shareholder, that's the Cedar Band of Paiutes, and all of our dividends go back to them every month. So we are creating this legacy for them and hopefully a pathway as well to success for their youth as they come and as they fill your seats here in this room and in other areas as well. So thanks, Tyler.
Probably time for one last question.
Yeah.
There's rumors that Cedar is going to grow to the size of St. George in the next 10 years. With the infrastructure that you're talking about, do you think that's accurate, or do you think that Cedar will grow at a slower rate than that?
I'm probably the perfectly wrong person to be asking that question of. That would be this gentleman right here. But from what I've heard, and of course, I don't know if any city's prepared by way of their infrastructure for what is coming down the pike. And I think there is growth, right? I think we've seen it through the pandemic. I keep playing with this thing in my pocket, and I meant to pull it out. I apologize. I had a law professor who said, listen, if you're used to putting your hands in your pockets, put your hands in your pockets. Just make sure there's no keys in your pocket that will disrupt the court or the jury. So I'm sure many of you have seen this, right? Or something similar to this. Well, right? I mean, some smart chap or gal came up with this for the pandemic. I don't know if you guys know what this is. Do you know what it is? It's so you can open up the door without touching the handle, right? And it's not that I'm a germaphobe. My wife claims that I am. But I wanted to be really careful to make sure that I wasn't touching high touch points, right? So, but someone came up with that. So again, necessity is the mother of invention. So as these things occur, pandemics, and this won't be the last one, I'm careful to say that, but I don't think this will be the last pandemic or pandemic style event that happens in our lifetimes, and especially yours. We are preparing for that next event, right? Whatever that event may be. And I think people in cities have seen that, yeah, they can do it. They can work anywhere. I tell my staff, I don't care where you're working. I don't care if you're on the beaches in Hawaii working. I don't care if you work better at midnight than you do at 12 noon. I just expect the work to get done. And they know that, right? So I allow them that flexibility to go and do, I'm really a life-work type of person versus a work-life, because life is cradle to grave. Work happens in between, school happens in between, family and children happen in between, and then retirement happens in between. But life really is everything, from cradle to grave. So I'm really that life-work type of person. So I allow them the flexibility to take 2 hours to go see your child's events at school. If there's a sick child, stay home, work from home. Whatever that is. I try and do what I was not allowed to do when I was growing up through my career, and wish that I had that flexibility. So now that I'm in a position to write those rules, I try to remember what it was like. So as I mentioned, just remember where you came from. Who made you who you are, and who helped you become who you are today. Again, I think we'll see that growth happen here in Cedar, because people from California, from Vegas, now know they can work anywhere and be just as effective, if not more effective, than they are going to the office. So I think we'll see that growth. I don't know, I can't speak to the infrastructure here in Cedar. I suspect that we're struggling just like any other city that's going through growing pains as well. So anyways, great question.